So I'm a little bit behind the times on this review, but what can I say? It's been the holidays and I've been busy. And so today is as good a day as any to try to start catching up. And so yeah, today we'll be talking about the Chicken Run sequel, Chicken Run: Dawn of the Nugget. So coming into this film, I was cautiously optimistic. They'd done a fair bit of recasting, which did have me worried, but I was willing to give it a chance. Plus it had decent reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. And on top of that, for the most part, I've always felt like Aardman films are absolute bangers. I don't think there's been one that I actually genuinely dislike, so I don't know, I figured at the very least it would be okay. And I acknowledge that to most people, it does hit that level of being okay, decent. But for me, it was absolute garbage. I hated it. I genuinely hated it. I actually tried to watch it the day it came out, and within 20 minutes I switched it off, and I didn't turn it back on for a couple of weeks. I needed that break. And then in the last day or so I tried it again, fell asleep part of the way through, had to rewind it, and it just... I don't think this is the movie for me. A lot of people seem to like it, but I just can't. For me, it's one of the most disappointing films of all time. So where do we start? Well, I liked the animation. There's that. It's the classic Aardman style. Excellent. But I didn't like the design choices. It's well animated, yes, but there's poor creative choices behind it. I think part of the charm of the original is they take a random innocuous place, a small family-run chicken farm, and yet the narrative treats it like this insane prisoner of war camp from World War I that they have to try to bust out of. So you buy into it. But you can recognize that it's still very silly. And at the same time, you can relate to it because it looks like any other farm that you've driven past in your entire life. But then you get to this film, and suddenly, the chickens aren't just contending with a normal poultry factory, but an actual super spy factory complete with laser sentries and other such ridiculous things. It becomes too extra, too over the top, lacking the charm of the original, being a normal everyday scenario gone wild. This turns it into a spy thriller film, but they don't have that grounding influence. And so, visually, for me it doesn't feel the same. But that gripe is just the tip of the iceberg, because there's a lot more. The voices? Ugh. Some of them, the ones they brought back from 20 years ago, they were really good. They sounded right, they fit, because what do you know? The OG voice actors were able to replicate their performances. Who would have thought? But then we have the recasts. The damn recasts. Look, I get that some were necessary, right? Like, the actor for Fowler, he's dead now. But that's not the case for everybody. And I know there's been controversy around Mel Gibson, so for him a recast might have made sense. But could they have not cast somebody that actually sounded a bit more like him, rather than Zachary Levi? Completely took me out of it. It didn't sound like him, didn't talk like him, felt like a different character in his skin. I mean, I'm sure some of that does come down to the way he was scripted, but just a big old nope for me. Then we have Ginger. Ginger, the main character, the heart of the first movie. And they recast her for no reason at all. Even though the OG actress was available, wanted to do it, and could still do the voice no problem. And maybe I'm just being a bit of a purist blinded by my nostalgia, but the new voice very much gave off "we have chicken run at home" type of vibes. Like a sound-alike that's just slightly off, and you can't really put your finger on the reason as to why. It just is. And so I found myself quite distracted by these changes, by these different voices, and it just drew me out of the film every time they'd speak. And that's not something you really want from 2 out of 3 of your main protagonists. They felt like impersonators, and not very good ones, and it just detracts from the experience. But hey, maybe the story itself was good, right? Nope, not for me. The start is really slow on plotting, with a whole lot of nothing, a whole lot of setup. We see Molly, their daughter, testing limits and trying to escape, just like Ginger did. Except Ginger had just witnessed one of her friends getting brutally executed by Mrs. Tweedy at the start of the film to add the stakes. Here, there was no drama beyond slight family tension. There's no stakes, no development, and it goes on for like 15 minutes until the story finally picks up and we see some development. We then move into a story that's overly grand and over the top for my taste. Like I said earlier, for me, part of the appeal of Chicken Run is in its simplicity. The small farm setting that feels larger than life due to the story and due to the characters. For these little chickens, a farm might as well be a prisoner of war camp. But this factory that we see would be very hard for a human to break into, let alone a chicken. They should have just gone with a normal factory, because to a chicken, it would still feel like a supervillain's lair. Very difficult to break into. And I don't really know how to describe it other than the vibe getting spoiled. Yeah, the vibe, it gets spoiled. And so the story goes off the walls in the worst ways, and you lose that original vibe, if that makes sense. Don't really know how to describe it other than that. The vibe, it gets spoiled. They go too hard to try to up the stakes and make it feel like the chickens have no chance, and so they have to make it more and more ridiculous. But not in a good way. And similarly, it becomes far more generic. It loses its identity. and that was sad. In terms of the characters, nothing really to write home about. A lot of focus is given to the new character of Molly, the daughter of Ginger and Rocky, who's about as interesting as a scoop of plain ice cream. And not vanilla ice cream, that would imply additional flavour. No, this kid is just plain ice cream. Just ice cream, cream flavoured. And this is who they want to center the film around. Yikes. She's literally discount Ginger, just less good. Her friend Frizzle is far more interesting, and yet she gets mind controlled within 20 minutes of meeting her, and thus she doesn't really play much of a role in the movie. On top of that, the OG characters kind of get wrecked. Ginger's just the worst. I mean, I just hate it when you take a classic character and flip their personality to make them feel not like the character that the audience actually remembers. It alienates the old fans right from the gate. I mean, when has this ever been done where it actually works? Does anybody have an example? Ugh. From the heroic leader of the chicken resistance to an overprotective mum willing to abandon other chickens to their fate. Hashtag not my Ginger. On top of that, Rocky gets reduced to the worst sort of comic relief where he only exists to mess up and get injured so we can laugh and move on. But I'm not laughing because A, most of those gags are not that funny and they get overused by the end of the film, but also B, he was such an interesting character in the first movie. He was very funny, but he had a lot of depth. And they seemingly just threw it all away. You hate to see it. And even the other chickens, they're only there sporadically. And they pretty much play the greatest hits, then they don't speak again, they let the main characters do everything. It felt like a lot of them got flanderized and were not used to their previous potential. They were kept in the background. Carted out to say a line or two that references the previous film, fade back to the background. Rinse and repeat. And then this takes us to the script, and the dialogue, and the jokes. And yeah, sometimes the jokes are funny, the gags are good, but they're few and far between. Like I said, they play the greatest hits of the first movie to make you laugh at the nostalgia, but then they flounder on the new stuff for the most part, which in turn only serves to highlight how much better the original movie actually was. And what's worse, they seem to have used up a lot of their best jokes in the trailer itself, so I didn't even find them funny to begin with because I'd already heard them before in the trailer, and thus the impact was lessened. In terms of the dialogue, yeah, it could be good at times, but I felt like they lacked the chemistry with the characters. That spark, especially between Ginger and Rocky, was just gone. Maybe part of it was the fresh voice actors, but it's also got to be the script. For me, it doesn't capture the heart of the characters or their personalities. And I feel like that was the final nail in the coffin of the film for me. Their dynamic is the heart of the first movie, and here it was just butchered. Ugh. And I'm honestly surprised I'm being so negative here, because it's rare for me to hate a film so utterly, but I do. I hate it, and I recognize I'm the minority, but I think it sucks. The end. And so with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the film if you've seen it? Did you like it, hate it? Do you agree with what I said? Maybe you disagree? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.